Spring of 1886, Dakota Territory, 12 miles south of what would become Bismarck. A German immigrant named Friedrich Weber announced he was going to dig a barn into the hillside beneath his house. Not beside his house, not behind it, beneath it. The other ranchers in the Cannonball River Valley thought he'd gone mad. Thomas Fletcher, who ran 200 head of cattle and considered himself the most experienced stockman in the territory, was the first to say it out loud. "Friedrich, you're planning to stable horses under your living room? That's not ranching. That's inviting disaster. The smell alone will drive your family out. And if the roof collapses, you lose your home and your livestock at the same time." But Friedrich had grown up in the Black Forest region of Germany, where his grandfather had kept a small dairy operation in a structure built into a hillside. The cows lived on the lower level, partially underground. The family lived above. The arrangement wasn't common, but it wasn't unheard of either. The livestock's body heat rose through the floor, warming the living quarters in winter. The earth surrounding the lower level stayed at a constant temperature year-round, cool in summer, insulated in winter. And when mountain storms came through, the animals were protected by tons of earth and stone that no surface barn could match. Friedrich had filed his claim on a particular piece of land specifically because of its topography. His property included a south-facing hillside that rose 20 feet over a span of 60 feet, a gradual slope, not a cliff. The top of the slope was flat enough for a house. The face of the slope could be excavated to create an underground space, and because the land sloped, he could dig straight into the hillside and create an entrance at ground level on the downhill side, while the space extended back under the house above. If you're watching because you value the ingenuity of people who looked at land and saw possibilities instead of limitations, hit that subscribe button. We're preserving knowledge of solutions that worked when failure meant losing everything. Help keep these frontier stories alive. His plan was ambitious: excavate a space 40 feet deep, 24 feet wide, and 8 feet high into the hillside. The ceiling would be the floor of his house above. The walls would be earth, reinforced with timber framing and stone. The entrance would face south, protected from north winds. Inside this space, he'd stable 8 horses with room for hay storage and equipment. His wife, Margaret, had concerns but understood the logic. "The horses would be warm," she said, studying his sketches one evening, "and we'd be warm from their heat. But Friedrich, if something goes wrong, if the ceiling fails, if water seeps in, if the horses panic being underground, we could lose everything at once." "We could," he agreed, "but if I build right, none of those things will happen. And if winter comes hard like it did in 80 and 81, surface barns fail. You know this. Thomas Fletcher lost 40 head in 81 when his barn roof collapsed under snow. John Morrison lost 60 when his barn caught fire from a lantern. Henry Schultz lost 30 when the walls blew in during that 3-day blow. A barn underground can't catch fire, can't blow over, and won't collapse under snow. Catherine Martinez, whose family had ranched the territory for a generation, offered a different perspective when she visited that summer. "My father built thick walls and deep foundations," she said, watching Friedrich mark out the dimensions on his hillside. "His barns have survived every storm. You don't need to dig into the earth like a badger. You just need to build solid." "Your father's barns are excellent," Friedrich acknowledged, "but they require lumber I can't afford and labor I don't have. I'm one man with a shovel and a plan. I can dig, and earth is free." Samuel Brooks, a veteran of frontier construction who'd built houses and barns across 3 territories, thought the structural concept was flawed. "You're going to dig 8 feet down and then put your house's weight on top of that ceiling," he said, shaking his head. "Friedrich, the load-bearing requirements are enormous. You'd need support timbers every 3 feet, each one sized for vertical load. And even then, I wouldn't trust it. One timber fails, the whole ceiling could come down. Then I'll timber it every 2 feet, Friedrich said calmly. and I'll use posts that are oversized for the load. I'll engineer it so that even if 2 posts failed, the others would hold. You're not an engineer. No, but I can calculate weight, and I can observe what holds and what breaks. And I can build stronger than necessary because the cost of failure is too high. Construction began in June. Friedrich started by cutting into the hillside, removing earth 1 shovelful at a time. The work was brutal. Dakota Territory in summer could reach 95 degrees. He dug from dawn until mid-morning, rested during the hottest hours, then worked again until dark. Margaret and their 2 sons, Johann, aged 12, and Klaus, aged 9, helped haul dirt away in a hand-built cart, spreading it to level the ground around the house site. After 2 weeks, he'd removed enough earth to mark the basic outline, a rectangular excavation beginning to take shape in the hillside. The entrance would be here, at ground level on the south side. The space would extend back 40 feet, tunneling into the hill. Above, 20 feet up the slope, his house would sit on ground level, its floor positioned directly over the back 2/3 of the underground space. Thomas Fletcher rode by regularly, usually with commentary. "You've dug a hole," he observed one afternoon in July. "A mighty big hole, but I still don't see how this becomes a barn. How are you going to roof it? How are you going to keep it from flooding? How are you going to get horses to go underground? Animals aren't stupid. They know caves and holes are where predators wait." Friedrich paused his digging, leaned on his shovel. "The roof is earth and my house floor. The drainage is a trench around the perimeter, feeding to a sump on the low side, and horses go where they're led if they trust the person leading them and if the space feels safe. I'll make it safe." By August, the basic excavation was complete. Now came the critical work, structural support. Friedrich cut and hauled timber from the river valley, straight cottonwood trunks 12 inches in diameter, trimmed to 8-foot lengths. These would be his vertical support posts. He positioned them every 2 feet in a grid pattern across the ceiling area, each one set into the earth floor and rising to support the ceiling above. 64 posts in total, each one capable of bearing several tons of vertical load. The grid was redundant by design. If 5 posts failed, 59 remained. Friedrich wasn't gambling. He was over-engineering because he understood that underground construction forgave no mistakes. Samuel Brooks came to inspect and was surprised by the density of support. "You've built a forest in there," he said, walking among the posts. "I'll grant you this. If the ceiling falls, it won't be because the posts failed. But you've still got to lay those ceiling timbers, and they've got to span from post to post without sagging. That's 30, 40 ceiling beams, each one carrying weight from above. How are you planning to source that much timber?" "I'm milling it," Friedrich said. He'd already started. Using a whipsaw operated by himself and Johann, he was converting logs into rough-hewn beams 8 inches square. The work was slow. A day's hard sawing might produce 3 beams, but the result was structural lumber sized for the load. The ceiling structure went up in September. Each beam spanned from post to post in one direction, creating a grid. Across these, he laid smaller joists running perpendicular. Then came planking, split cottonwood boards nailed tight together, then a layer of canvas soaked in tar for waterproofing, then a layer of clay, packed and smoothed. Then finally earth, compacted in 6-inch layers, until he'd built up 18 inches of fill between the planking and where his house floor would be. The result was a ceiling that could support not just the weight of his house, but the weight of everything in it, plus snow load on the roof above, plus a safety margin of several £1,000s. When finished, he and Johann and Klaus walked across it, testing. The beams didn't flex. The structure felt solid as bedrock. Like what you're seeing, hit that like button. It helps us reach folks who appreciate the problem-solving that kept people and animals alive in brutal conditions. One click preserves this knowledge. The walls were next. The earth walls of the excavation were stable, but raw. Friedrich built retaining structures, vertical posts every 4 feet, horizontal planking behind them, backfilled with stone where gaps appeared. The retaining walls weren't load-bearing. The earth itself was doing that work. They were simply to prevent erosion and give the space finished edges. For the entrance, he built a frame structure, a 12-foot wide opening on the south face of the hillside, with heavy timber posts supporting a header beam. The opening could be closed with large wooden doors, but normally it would be left open for light and ventilation. A ramp led down from ground level to the barn floor, dropping 3 feet over 12 feet of length, gentle enough for horses to navigate comfortably. Inside, he divided the space. 8 box stalls along the north wall, each one 8 feet by 8 feet, sufficient for a horse to stand, turn, and lie down. The stalls were separated by timber walls 4 feet high, with gaps above for airflow. Along the south wall, he built hay storage, a raised platform keeping the hay off the earth floor. And in the center, a wide aisle ran the length of the barn, providing access to all stalls and workspace for tending animals. The floor was critical. Bare earth would become mud. Friedrich solved this by laying a foundation of stones, covering them with sand, and then surfacing with tightly fitted wooden planks. The planking could be removed and cleaned. Urine would drain through gaps between planks into the sand and stone below, then slowly percolate away. Solid waste would be removed daily. The system wasn't perfect, but it was manageable. Ventilation was more complex. Heat and moisture from 8 horses in an enclosed underground space could create problems: condensation, poor air quality, respiratory issues. Friedrich installed 4 ventilation shafts, 8-inch diameter pipes made from rolled tin, extending from the barn ceiling up through the earth and house floor to the house roof. 2 shafts drew in fresh air from ground level outside the barn entrance. 2 shafts vented stale air from the back of the barn up through the house and out the roof. The system created passive airflow. Warm, moist air rose through the vent shafts, while cooler, fresh air entered from the entrance. Simple physics, no moving parts. By October, the underground barn was functional. Friedrich moved his 8 horses in, 4 draft animals and 4 saddle horses. The horses hesitated at the entrance. Thomas Fletcher had been right about that. Animals are suspicious of enclosed underground spaces. But Friedrich led them in one at a time, speaking calmly, letting each one smell the space and see the stalls. Within an hour, all 8 were settled, eating hay, adjusting to their new quarters. Margaret descended the ramp that evening to see how they'd adapted. "It's warmer than I expected," she said, noting the temperature. Outside, the October air had dropped to 42 degrees after sunset. Inside the barn, the temperature was 54 degrees. The horse's body heat, combined with the insulating effect of being surrounded by earth, was creating a stable environment. "It'll be even more pronounced in winter," Friedrich predicted. "The earth temperature at this depth stays around 50 degrees year-round. The horses will add heat. We should be able to keep this space above freezing even when it's 30 below outside." "And the smell?" Margaret asked. That had been Thomas Fletcher's first objection. Friedrich pointed to the ventilation shafts. "Air moves through. As long as I clean stalls daily and maintain airflow, the smell should be manageable. If it becomes a problem in the house, I'll add more ventilation." The house itself went up in November. Friedrich built directly on top of the barn's ceiling structure, using the same timber and earth technique, but on a smaller scale. The house was modest, 20 feet by 30 feet, divided into 3 rooms. But it was warm. Heat from the horses below rose through the floor. The family needed only a small stove for cooking and additional warmth on the coldest days. Their fuel consumption was a fraction of what neighbors burned. Catherine Martinez visited in late November and was impressed despite her initial skepticism. "I walked through the barn," she said. "It's dry, it's clean, the air moves, the horses look healthy. And your house is warm." "Friedrich, I thought this was madness. I was wrong. It's engineering." "It's old engineering," Friedrich said. "My grandfather did this. People in Europe have done it for centuries. The innovation isn't the concept, it's applying it here with available materials, solving for Dakota conditions. December brought the first serious test. Temperatures dropped below zero for a week. Surface barns required constant fire watch to prevent water troughs from freezing. Horses in unheated barns needed extra feed just to maintain body temperature. Thomas Fletcher burned a cord of wood in 6 days, heating his barn enough to keep his prize-breeding stock from suffering. Friedrich burned nothing. The underground barn maintained a temperature between 48 and 52 degrees throughout the cold snap. The horses were comfortable, water didn't freeze, the family above stayed warm with minimal fire. And the system proved Samuel Brooks's structural concerns unfounded. The ceiling held steady under the house's weight, plus 2 feet of snow on the roof above. But the real test came in January 1887. The blizzard that would be remembered as the death storm across Dakota and Montana territories. It began on January 9th with a temperature drop so rapid that cattle froze standing in fields. By noon, the thermometer read -15 degrees Fahrenheit. By evening, -28. Then the wind came. Then the snow. The storm lasted 4 days. Wind speeds exceeded 60 miles per hour. Snowfall totals reached 5 feet. Drifts piled 15 to 20 feet high against structures. The temperature never rose above -20, and at the storm's worst, it reached -43 degrees. Across the territory, livestock died by the thousands. Cattle caught in the open froze where they stood. Horses trapped in surface barns died when roofs collapsed under snow load or when buildings blew apart in the wind. Some ranchers tried to bring animals into their houses, but horses panicked in unfamiliar spaces, causing injuries and damage. Others tried to dig out barn doors after drifts blocked them, but the work was impossible in the conditions. Thomas Fletcher lost 23 horses. His barn, well built by normal standards, couldn't withstand the combination of wind stress and snow load. Part of the roof failed on the second night. Snow poured in. Horses panicked. In the chaos and cold, nearly half his stock died before he could get the survivors moved to another structure. Catherine Martinez's family lost 11 horses and 47 cattle. Their barns held structurally, but the cold was so extreme that animals couldn't maintain body temperature. They burned every stick of wood they had and scavenged fence posts for fuel. But it wasn't enough. Animals froze in their stalls. Samuel Brooks, the builder who'd questioned Friedrich's engineering, lost his workshop when the roof collapsed. He and his family survived in their house, but they burned furniture and tools to stay alive. When the storm broke, he'd lost half his possessions and nearly frozen despite his best efforts. Inside Friedrich's underground barn, the horses barely knew a crisis was happening. The temperature dropped to 46 degrees, cool, but nowhere near dangerous. The horses had hay and water. The ventilation shafts continued drawing air through the space, though Friedrich had to dig out the exterior vents twice when drifts covered them. The ceiling held under the combined weight of house snow load, calculated later at over 6,000 pounds per square yard, and ice accumulation. Not a single timber cracked. In the house above, the family stayed warm with a fire that consumed less than a cord during the entire 4-day storm. The heat from below, combined with the insulating effect of snow piled around and on top of the house, created a space that required minimal additional heating. Friedrich checked the barn every 6 hours by descending through a trapdoor he'd cut in the house floor. A direct access point he'd installed precisely for emergencies like this when the outside entrance might be blocked. Subscribe to this channel if you value the practical wisdom that let people not just survive, but thrive in conditions that killed the unprepared. We're documenting frontier knowledge that's more relevant than ever. Join us in preserving these stories. When the storm broke on January 13th, Friedrich dug out his entrance, a 4-hour job clearing a drift that had piled 12 feet deep against the south face of the hillside. When he finally opened the doors, his 8 horses walked out into bright sunlight, healthy and calm. Across the valley, ranchers were counting dead animals, assessing structural damage, and trying to comprehend how they'd survived. Thomas Fletcher came by 2 days later. He'd aged in those 4 days, lost weight, moved slower, spoke quieter. "I lost 23 head," he said, standing at the entrance to Friedrich's underground barn. "Good animals, valuable animals. They died because my barn failed and because the cold was too much. Your animals—" He paused, watching Friedrich's horses in the corral, none the worse for their experience. "Your animals didn't even know there was a storm. How is that possible?" Friedrich walked him through the barn, explaining the principles. The earth insulation, 8 feet of soil on 3 sides, 20 feet above, providing thermal mass that resisted temperature change. The body heat from the horses warming the space. The structural design that made roof collapse impossible. The south-facing entrance that was protected from north winds and could be dug out even after massive drifts. The ventilation system that kept air moving without requiring exposed vents, vulnerable to wind damage. "You were right," Thomas said simply. "I mocked this. I called it madness. I was wrong, and my horses paid the price for my arrogance. Your horses lived because you understood something I didn't, that sometimes the best protection is going down instead of building up." Over the following months, the story spread. Samuel Brooks came by in March with detailed questions about the structural engineering. He'd been hired to rebuild several barns destroyed in the storm, and his clients were asking about underground options. "I need to understand the load calculations," Samuel said, carrying a notebook. "The timber sizing, the post spacing, the ceiling construction. I told people you were foolish. Now they're asking me to build what you built, and I need to know how to do it safely." Friedrich spent 3 days teaching him, not just the measurements and materials, but the principles, why the posts were spaced as they were, how the ceiling structure distributed load, why the ventilation shafts were sized and positioned specifically, how the drainage system prevented water infiltration. Samuel took notes and made sketches, and when he left he said, "This should be standard practice in this territory. Every rancher should have the option to build like this." Catherine Martinez brought her father to see the underground barn in April. The old rancher walked through slowly, examining the stalls, testing the timbers, studying the ceiling structure. Finally, he said, "In my country, some of the old Spanish land grants had structures like this. Not for horses, for storage, for cool spaces in summer. But the principle is the same. Dig into the earth, use its stability and its temperature. I'd forgotten this. Your grandfather remembered." By fall of 1887, 4 ranchers in the valley were building underground or partially underground barns. None were identical to Friedrich's. Each adapted the concept to their specific land and needs. William Chen, who'd come to the territory on railroad construction and stayed to ranch, built his into a west-facing hillside with half the space underground and half above ground, combining the benefits of earth insulation with the ease of conventional construction. Henrik Johansson, a Norwegian who understood earth-sheltered building from his homeland, created an even more ambitious version. A fully underground space for 12 horses, with the entrance disguised by a conventional-looking barn facade that protected the real entrance from wind and drifting. The principle spread beyond the Cannonball River Valley. A rancher near Fort Abraham Lincoln built an underground stable for his mule teams. A merchant in Bismarck created an underground warehouse that maintained stable temperatures year-round, protecting inventory from both freezing and heat. The Territorial Agricultural Extension Office documented Friedrich's design and included it in a bulletin on cold climate livestock management. What Friedrich had done was not invention, it was adaptation and application. Europeans had built earth-sheltered structures for centuries. The innovation was recognizing that this ancient technique solved specific frontier problems: limited building materials, extreme temperature swings, catastrophic storms, the high cost of heating large spaces. He'd taken knowledge from another place and time, adapted it to Dakota materials and conditions, and proven it could work reliably. Modern agricultural engineering recognizes the value of earth-sheltered livestock facilities. Studies have demonstrated what Friedrich proved empirically. Earth insulation, at depths of 6 to 8 feet, provides stable temperatures year-round, typically maintaining 45–55 degrees Fahrenheit, regardless of surface conditions. This stability reduces heating costs in winter, cooling costs in summer, and stress on animals. The structural principles Friedrich used, redundant support, distributed load, adequate ventilation, are now standard practice in underground construction. Contemporary livestock facilities rarely go fully underground, but many incorporate earth-sheltering principles. Banked barns built into hillsides, bermed walls providing insulation, underground sections for temperature-sensitive operations. The engineering has been refined with modern materials and calculation methods, but the fundamental concept remains what Friedrich demonstrated. The earth provides protection that surface structures cannot match. The underground barn served Friedrich's family for 32 years. He expanded it twice, once in 1889 to add 4 more stalls when his operation grew, and again in 1895 to create a separate underground space for equipment storage. His sons Johann and Klaus both became ranchers. Both built earth-sheltered barns on their own properties, and both survived the brutal winter of 1896–97 with minimal livestock losses, while neighbors using conventional barns suffered. Friedrich died in 1918, having ranched Dakota Territory and then North Dakota for 33 years. The underground barn outlived him. It remained in use until 1954, when the property was sold and the new owner built modern facilities. The barn entrance was filled in, though the structure remains intact beneath the hillside, the timber posts still standing, the ceiling still solid after nearly 70 years. In 2009, a researcher studying frontier architecture discovered Friedrich's original plans and construction notes preserved in a County Historical Society archive. The drawings were remarkably detailed: structural calculations, material lists, ventilation diagrams, even sketches showing horse behavior in the underground space. The researcher published a paper analyzing the engineering and comparing it to modern earth-sheltered design principles. Friedrich's intuitive calculations were within 5% of what modern structural engineering would specify for the same conditions. The frontier experience teaches a consistent lesson. Survival requires thinking beyond convention. Friedrich Weber looked at a hillside and saw not an obstacle, but an opportunity. He recognized that going down could provide better protection than building up. He understood that ancient techniques could solve modern problems if applied intelligently. And he was willing to be mocked, to be called foolish, to build something nobody in the territory had seen before, because the logic was sound and the alternative was risk. His neighbors laughed at the underground barn until the winter proved it worked. They mocked the idea of horses living beneath a house until their own horses died while his survived. They questioned the engineering until the storm that should have killed everything proved the structure unbreakable. Then the laughter stopped, the mocking ended, and the learning began. The question wasn't whether Friedrich was smarter than his neighbors. Most of them were experienced ranchers with decades of frontier knowledge. The question was whether he was willing to look beyond conventional frontier practice, to draw on knowledge from different places and times, to build something strange because the principles made sense. He was willing, and when the crisis came, when the death storm killed thousands of animals across the territory, his willingness made the difference between loss and survival. The underground barn is gone now, filled in and forgotten by most, but the wisdom remains. Sometimes the best shelter is underground. Sometimes ancient techniques solve modern problems. Sometimes the people mocking your choices are the ones who'll lose everything when conditions become extreme. Friedrich Weber knew these truths. His horses lived because of it. His neighbors learned because of it. And anyone willing to look beyond convention can apply the same principles today. Sometimes the safest barn is the one built into the earth. Sometimes the warmest house sits on top of living animals. Sometimes the people laughing are the ones who don't understand engineering. Friedrich Weber built underground when everyone said he should build up. The Dakota winter settled the argument definitively. When your neighbor's horses freeze and yours thrive, you've proven something important. The underground barn stands as both method and metaphor. As method, it provides practical solutions: how to protect livestock, how to conserve heat, how to survive catastrophic weather with limited resources. As metaphor, it represents the value of unconventional thinking, of drawing knowledge from unexpected sources, of trusting physics over tradition. Both remain relevant. We still face problems requiring innovative solutions. We still benefit from looking to the past for answers the present has forgotten. We still need people willing to dig into hillsides because the engineering is sound, regardless of what neighbors think. Friedrich Weber dug a barn beneath his house because he understood thermal mass and structural engineering and animal behavior. His neighbors mocked him because they trusted convention over calculation. The January blizzard settled the argument forever. When your horses walk out healthy after a storm that killed thousands, when your barn doesn't just survive but thrives under conditions that destroyed everything else, you've proven something that matters. Do you have the humility to learn from unlikely sources, the courage to build something nobody's seen before? The wisdom to recognize that sometimes the best solution is the one that looks most strange? Friedrich Weber did, and his horses lived because of it. The question is, what are you willing to build?